Welcome to Life and Liberty Radio with David Householder. I'm Josh Jose, and together, you and I are taking another step toward freedom, both spiritual and political. So get comfortable, breathe in, and ignite your imagination. Envision a society that is spiritually deep and truly free. It's easy if you try.
Well, it was a very big week in the Supreme Court this week. In fact, incredibly big. 50 years from now, in your history class, your grandkids will be learning all about this week because three big things happened. We talked about the Voting Rights Act. We talked about the Defense of Marriage Act and Prop 8. Now, the Voters' Right Act was basically a 1960s civil rights deal by the Johnson administration to try to get the South to make sure that black people got a chance to vote. And in effect, de facto, they kept them from voting. Like 6% in some areas of the African Americans were able to vote because of all kinds of complicated little rules, kind of like the zoning rules we have and the laws that keep us out of buildings, building code and all that kind of thing. It can get so tax code's another one. Keep it complicated and people can't comply. And if they can't comply, then they can't vote, they can't build a building, they can't do the kind of things they need to do, which is a typical government thing. So basically what happened was the federal government in the 60s said, hey, you can't do that. No more poll taxes, no more of that stuff. Let everyone vote. And so the Voting Rights Act was on the block, as was the Defense of Marriage Act. This was a Clinton-era thing from back in the 90s where Clinton and even the very, very liberal senators like Paul Wellstone were for it. Basically, that marriage is between a man and a woman for federal purposes. And there was Prop 8. California continues to vote for traditional marriage, and the courts keep telling them no. So what are we going to do about that? So those three things came up, and we've been anticipating these for a long time. Let's start with the Voting Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. Well, the Voting Rights Act was real interesting. It sort of broke down along typical 5 to 4 ideological lines. More or less, we have four conservatives, four liberals, and one libertarian, Kennedy, and he kind of floats back and forth, and he definitely enjoys that. So the Voting Rights Act basically had the conservatives and the libertarians saying, we've got to get rid of this because it's really anachronistic. And Kennedy basically came out and said, the libertarian, we can't treat some states in the South differently because that's the essence of Reconstruction. The North tells the South what to do, and that undermines our sense of federalism. Either you're a state or you're not. Either Texas has the same rights as Illinois and Minnesota and North Dakota. Just because of its history, you can't take away those rights and give those to the federal government. So if you do that with one state, you have to do it with all of them. But the Voting Rights Act was really targeted only at states from the former Confederacy, basically. So that's really not fair, and that's true. And the truth is, this thing already worked. Now, the two arguments are this. Since the Voting Rights Act worked so well, let's keep it going, and that's the liberal side. And the other one is since the Voting Rights Act succeeded, it's done its job, let's do away with it, because it's not really fair anyways, because it favors some states over others. So there's really a good argument either way, but I would agree that either we treat all states the same or we don't. We can't have some second-tier states and some first-tier states. So basically they sent that back to the states, said the states are the ones who decide who votes, and that's the way the framers intended it in the first place. So, Voting Rights Act. Then we had the Defense of Marriage Act. Now, the Defense of Marriage Act was a Clinton-era thing that talked about the whole idea of a marriage being between one man and one woman for federal purposes. And the reason we had to come up with that was not that we were bigoted one way or another or really opinionated on gay marriage. It was because, hey, we've got all of these new federal regulations which affect marriage, benefits, and Social Security. And it had gotten so big, we had to decide who gets these benefits and who doesn't. So it wasn't really about marriage, it was about benefits. This is why I call it the Mother May I decision. And it has more to do with how much dole we get from the government. And if we have an intimate relationship with someone else, we get part of that dole. So help me understand how the federal government, according to the vision of the founders, would have anything to say about our relationships. or that you get a bigger dole if you're in a relationship with someone who gets a dole. This is how far it's gotten. It's become a mother may I thing. We have to give gay people these rights, according to the proponents of marriage equality, because, hey, they suffer a benefit deficit. Well, at what point do we stop here? If I'm best friends with someone, do I get benefits too? If I'm closer to that person and don't have a sexual relationship or don't have a marriage, where does it end? Where does it end? And rather than redefining marriage to match the benefits, let's get rid of the benefits and let the people decide what marriage is. Let human beings decide what marriage is. You and I both know that we got along for centuries and millennia without marriage licenses. It was only after after the Civil War that marriage licenses came into regular usage, and insidiously they were to basically ban the marriages between races and interracial marriage, which is really sad, really dark, and all that kind of stuff. And that was the origin of marriage licenses. And so basically, when people are afraid, they give the government more control, like at 9/11 and the Patriot Act, and the government never takes it back. So we still pay our little money to get a marriage license, and we give it to the government, and we play Mother May I with the government. Mother, may I please get married? And basically, the proponents of gay marriage are saying, hey, marriage equality are saying, hey, we want to play Mother May I too. We want Mother to say yes to us. Well, what if we just told Mother, the government, that she has nothing to say to adult relationships, friendships, marriages, whatever? People have a right to free association. They can live with whom they please. They can have roommates. They can get married, whatever. This is a free country. As long as they're not hurting someone else, people can live with whomever they choose. And if somebody wants to call something a marriage, it's up to them to convince me it is, because I'm not necessarily going to agree with them. There are certainly situations which you wouldn't agree with as being marriage, and we have a right to say, I don't think so. And it's up to you to convince me that it is a marriage. And if we were to take the federal benefits out of the whole thing and taxation structures and everything else, maybe this would work. Maybe with free association, people can live with whomever they choose, make contracts with whomever they choose, make promises with whomever they choose. That's the whole idea of a voluntary contract. Without involving Mother May I, maybe we could get away from the government mandating what kind of adult relationships need licensing. Think about it. Now, I got to say, I'm a traditional marriage guy. I think for a lot of reasons, one man and one woman, that seems to me to be a marriage. And I think a lot of the other stuff isn't. It just isn't. It doesn't look like a marriage to me, and I'm not convinced it is. And so in a free society, can I say that? Can I think that? I would hope so. In a truly free society, the government would have nothing to say about it. And if a heterosexual couple moves from Ohio to Utah, 100% of the people are going to agree that it's a marriage if they tell them that. And a gay couple, I don't know. I don't think it's ever going to hit 100. And that's just a reality. It's just a reality. Can the gay and lesbian community try to convince people that it is? Sure, it's in a free speech society. Sure they can. You can make your case. But then on the other hand, we listening have a right to say, I don't think so. Or maybe I do think so. Whatever. And I just really believe that even if there were no Bible, even if there were no God, and I believe there's a Bible, I believe there's a God, but even if there were neither, that it wouldn't make sense to call that a marriage. It just doesn't to me. And I have a right to say that. But on the other hand, in a free country, a gay couple can come together and live in a house and rent it together, buy it together, have a contract together, give each other's benefits and 401k, and you can do that. You can do that with or without the government. So let's get the government out of our families. Family formation is a right in a voluntary society among adults. Now, here's the problem comes with kids, though, because we've always said that kids and mentally ill are not part of a free society in the same way. They're just not. A 5-year-old can't say, I'm leaving and I'm going to go away and I'm going to do what I want. No, you can't do that. Children and the mentally ill, we say, no, we have some responsibility for them, and they don't have 100% freedom as healthy adults do. So what about adoption? What about fostering? And if my wife and I were to try to foster, there'd be a lot of people running us through counseling and testing and everything else. Well, On what basis will they decide? Would it be perhaps statistics? And those statistics pretty clearly, according to the University of Texas at Austin, are that children do best in a long-term relationship between a man and a woman. That's statistically provable. So are those people favored then in adoption and in fostering? And see, this is where it gets sticky. I believe that people can gather together and form family as they choose. But children are another thing. We've always said that society has a piece of that responsibility with children and with the mentally ill. And I believe that makes a lot of sense. There's also a lot of peer pressure to celebrate. There's rainbow-colored city halls all over the country right now. And what about people who, just kind of neutral or don't like it? They don't like the fact that DOMA was struck down by the Supreme Court. So we had Kennedy, we had Kagan, we had Ginsburg, we had Breyer, and Sotomayor voting against DOMA, which was the Defense of Marriage Act, and Thomas, Roberts, Scalia, and Alito voting to uphold DOMA. So it was 5-4, and Kennedy had the swing vote. So the Defense of Marriage Act was struck down. The Voting Rights Act was struck down. And in a way, it's states' rights for both, saying, hey, the states can decide on marriage and the states can decide on voting rights. And so kind of there's some consistency there. Maybe there's an anti-central government thing, which I think would be pretty much healthy. Then there was Prop 8, and California decided twice, voted twice, that marriage would be defined as a man and a woman in a lifelong committed relationship, and the courts kept saying no. And Roberts, Ginsburg, Scalia, and Kagan, interesting group, voted basically to dismiss Prop 8, and Kennedy, Thomas, Alito, and Sotomayor voted to voted against getting rid of Prop 8. Kennedy had the most interesting thing to say. Kennedy, the libertarian, said, hey, listen, there's a conflict of interest here. And what does he mean by that? He said, he's a Californian, he's from Sacramento. He says, California voted twice, and it has a long tradition of these voters' initiatives. And in 2 voters' initiatives, the Californians said, we believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. And the court said no. And he said, and then the Brown administration, the Jerry Brown administration, basically pretended to uphold what the people were voting for, but in reality, they were against what the people were saying. He says, well, the people didn't get a fair shake, and so he was in the dissenting opinion saying Prop 8 should be upheld because the people in Sacramento, in Brown's administration, were bound by the votes to represent the people, and they failed to do so. And that was a very interesting way of looking at that. A very interesting way of looking at that. So we got some complicated stuff. We've got marriage equality stuff going on. We've got voting rights stuff going on. And the voting rights thing, I had my genetics run, and you can do that now. It was $7 million a few years ago. It was $300 when I did it. It's down to $99 now. And the truth is there's no such thing as a pure racial person. We are all blended. We're all mixed. Race is basically a political construction put together to divide people and to conquer them. And there is only one human race. And to continue to mark the boxes of, black, white, Latino, what does that even mean? Latinos have as much ethnic range as Anglos do, from all the way African to all the way Spaniard European. So what does that even mean? It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. Oh, Texas is going to be 45% Latino. Well, yeah. Well, does that mean if you have a last name with a Spanish background that counts? This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Race needs to disappear. We are one human race, and there shouldn't be different rules for different skin colors or anything like that. And so I welcome the Voting Rights Act being struck down because we need to move to become a society where it doesn't matter, as Dr. King said, what skin color we have, because all of us have a blended skin color. I have a lot of Middle Eastern blood. I didn't know that till I got my genetics run, and you're going to be surprised if you do it too. So that's the way that is. I don't welcome the DOMA thing. Part of me, I go back and forth on that. I'm a traditional marriage guy, but on the other hand, I want to get government out of it. Maybe this was a step in that direction, removing the federal layer. And with Prop 8, I wish Kennedy had prevailed because the Brown administration acted in bad faith by not supporting the vote of the people when they brought it to court. And there was really nobody supporting it in the way that it should be. It didn't get a fair shake in court, and that's what Kennedy said. So I think he was right on Prop 8. I think if we're going to move things to the states, we got to let things go to the states. And if that's messy, it's messy. Messy is good. Messy is good. Complicated is good because that's the way nature is. That's the way real life is. And to oversimplify, to overcentralize is not such a good thing. So a big day in the Supreme Court. Think about these things. Talk about these things. Enjoy being in a free society, what freedom we have left, and continue to be brave enough to say, I don't agree with this, or I do agree with that. I trust my gut on this, or I trust my gut on that, or help me understand why you believe differently. So basically, bottom line is, it was a pretty good day in that the court moved things back to the states, or tried to. But on the other hand, they kind of fumbled the ball with Prop 8, which said, no, the federal government is in charge of deciding what they do at the states. So it's in tension. This is what a democracy does. And once again, it's messy to be in the United States of America, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
So put some sunshine and water on these fresh ideas and keep taking that next step toward freedom. Join us every weekday for the latest life and liberty ideas. The views expressed on this program are purely those of the presenter, and not necessarily those of the advertisers or organizations or persons with which the presenter has a relationship. Please click on the Amazon banner at the top of the Life and Liberty page, and consider doing all your online shopping through this portal. See you tomorrow.